If you clicked on this video, then you've probably had that moment where someone else gets promoted and you're sitting there thinking, wait, what? I hit every deadline, I go the extra mile, and I'm often the person people come to when stuff breaks. So why was it them and not me? Well, this is something that I've heard a lot from colleagues, from my audience, from friends, and it's even something that I used to think myself. But after climbing the career ladder to now leading analytics for a multi-billion-dollar company, but now making videos about how to work smarter and build a career that you actually enjoy, I realized that promotions have nothing to do with how hardworking you are. In fact, working hard can sometimes actually be the reason that you're not getting promoted. Now, in this video, I'm going to explain exactly why the best performers often get overlooked and the hidden rules that actually drive career advancement. Why you're not getting promoted, even though you're good at your job. So let's talk about what's actually going on here. Because if you're anything like me, or most of the people that I speak to who feel stuck in their careers, then it's not that you're bad at your job. In fact, you're probably really good at it. And that is kind of the whole problem. So when you start out your career, you're at the bottom of the ladder, and this is known as the individual contributor section, which means that your job revolves around doing stuff, as opposed to leading or strategy. And when you're in this stage of your career, you get promoted by being really good at doing, and that's how you can move several spaces up. But eventually, the next level is no longer about doing, it's about leading, which means thinking strategically, it's about influence, it's about communication. But here's where it gets really frustrating and honestly quite heartbreaking. So in his book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, Marshall Goldsmith calls this the success delusion. And he says, the skills and habits that got you to your current level of success often become the very reasons you stop progressing. So basically, the traits that got you to your position, such as working hard, having drive, individual contribution, i.e. the doing stuff, can suddenly become liabilities because in the lens of leadership, they make you look difficult and closed off and insecure at that next level. And when I first read that, my head was like, wow, because I'd been stuck in this loop and my instinct was to always try harder. It was to work more, it was to push further, it was to take on more responsibility because, well, that had always worked up until that point. Well, Marshall says in the book that success triggers new problems because high-performing professionals tend to cling to what they've always done and just expect it to keep working. So the book's core thesis is clear. If you want to reach the next level of your career, then you've got to let go of the old playbook. And Goldsmith outlines 3 specific habits that are super common in high performers, but that actually prevent you from moving to the next level. Understanding and changing these habits are the keys to getting through that barrier. So let's go through these 3 behaviors, understand how they are liabilities for your career advancement, and then how to subtly change these behaviors so that they become accelerators for your career. Number 1 is delivering value by doing everything yourself. Now, when you're good at your job, your default instinct is to just get stuff done, especially when you're in that individual contributor section. And then you become the fixer, the closer, the one who always comes through. This can actually become a trap because what you see as very high performance, well, leadership can interpret that as micromanagement. Because if you're stuck in the weeds every time and nothing moves without you touching it, then it starts to raise questions when it comes to thinking of you in the next level, such as, do they not trust their team or colleagues? Are they not able to work with others? Are they too detail focused to see the big picture? And then they think, can this be scaled? Being the one who saves the day and does it all starts to look like a bottleneck and not brilliance. So what do you do instead? Well, you need to become the person who enables other people. That might mean document the process instead of just fixing it. It could mean mentoring that new hire so that they can run with it next time. Or it could just be as simple as asking, is there a smarter way to do this that doesn't rely on me? It's about shifting from being that go-to person to being the person who makes work go without them. Because the higher you want to rise, the less it is about what you personally do and the more it is about how you set things up so that the work happens better, even when you're not the one doing it. Behavior number two is adding too much value. So sometimes your instinct is going to be to add more. You see a problem, you want to jump in, you want to offer a suggestion, you want to tweak things because you want to improve the outcome. Well, this can actually make you look worse and not better. Now, I understand that it starts with good intentions. You want the team's work to shine. You see ways in which you can improve something. So you chip in, you polish the deck, you reword the email, you suggest a better slide in that presentation. But over time, what happens is this creates a pattern because you're the person who always has notes, who always has a fix, who always has to put their fingerprint on something. And when you're trying to pass that barrier to the next level, this can seem like you don't trust other people to deliver. It makes you come across as overly critical or perfectionistic. And when you're considered for that next role, what you're actually doing is unintentionally creating this culture where no one feels ownership because everything has to run through you. Now, I've seen this dynamic play out in teams I've led. And honestly, I've been that person too, thinking that I was being helpful when really I was stepping on other people's toes. So, what is the fix? Well, instead of always thinking, how can I improve this? Try asking instead, is this good enough to succeed? And you'll be surprised at how often the answer to that is yes. Because leadership, whether formal or informal, isn't about putting your fingerprint on everything. It's about making other people's fingerprints shine. So let them own it. Let it be 90% perfect. Let your silence be the confidence that says, I trust your judgment. And then that's how people start seeing you as someone who lifts other people up instead of someone who needs to be involved in everything. And paradoxically, that's what makes you look more like a leader and how you can break through that barrier. So behavior number three is working very visibly hard. So this was something that really used to trip me up. There was a time where I thought the best way to show how committed I was to work was to literally look overworked. I believed that those late night emails, back-to-back meetings, constant multitasking, working weekends would signal my dedication. But as Marshall explains in the book, looking visibly busy doesn't make you seem impressive. It makes it look like you can barely keep your head above water. Now, this obviously depends on context, but in most professional environments, being constantly rushed or stressed out isn't interpreted as, wow, they really work hard. It's seen as they can't prioritize. They're always reactive and not proactive. They're overwhelmed and maybe they're not ready for more. Now, this was a real mindset shift for me because I used to think that effort alone was enough. But promotions, especially as you go up past that individual contributor stage, aren't about reward for working the longest hours. They're a vote of confidence in your judgment. But what is the alternative then? Well, instead of trying to show how hardworking you are, try to show how clearly you're thinking. This might mean setting better boundaries or communicating updates in a way that's conscious and calm rather than chaotic. It might mean prioritizing ruthlessly, not just to get more done, but to do less of the wrong stuff. And look, this doesn't mean you have to pretend that everything's easy or you're not busy, but the people who get promoted are usually the ones who make things look manageable. So instead of proving how much you can carry, try showing that you know what's worth carrying in the first place. Now, if you've been sitting there wondering why the promotion always feels just out of reach, and if you've ever felt stuck or sidelined or like people just aren't seeing your potential, then I want you to know that it's not permanent. Careers don't change overnight, but they do change, often faster than you think. When you start taking ownership of how you're showing up, how you're seen, and how you can solve problems, you're not as far away as you think.